Politicization of the Orlando Tragedy 1-year anniversary. Hey, it's Prince of Queens, and it's been a year after the Orlando massacre that left 49 people dead at the gay nightclub called Pulse. You probably heard about it by now. Of course, this event has been heavily politicized by both the left and the right, though I am noticing on Twitter that currently it seems to be the right-wing people that are more active in tweeting hashtags related to this tragedy. But as for the left, it shouldn't be hard to figure out that intersectional feminists only want unity among the LGBT demographics under the condition that there will also be a hierarchy within that unified demographic. And that hierarchy gets to decide who is worthy of having an opinion based on if they are oppressed enough to matter. And right on top of that hierarchy seems to be Islamic people at the moment. I speculate personally that the left does this so that leaders can easily order the queer masses around so that the LGBT community is a unified population of people that can be utilized for political ends, which has been plainly evident in the case of the LA Pride Parade being changed into a big Trump protest. And just today, I have been confronted with a shining example of this hierarchy building within the LGBT community in relation to Orlando. And that is the continued insistence from the left that the Orlando massacre on June 12th of 2016 that left 49 people dead was not an act of terror from a man of Middle Eastern descent that pledged allegiance to ISIS, but rather any number of other things. They say that it was a result of the psychological derangement of a mentally ill closet case that should have never gotten his hands on a gun to begin with. They say it's a shocking display of toxic masculinity, and even, yes, a large number of people are still insisting to this day that this was not just a general attack on homos, but rather an attack on quote-unquote queer people of color, because most of the victims were Latino. And you gotta remember that racial minorities always have it worse, so we always gotta remember that. This tweet in particular has gone viral, though it's not the worst example. I have talked to people in my personal circles that insist that the shooter, Omar Mateen, must have been racist against Latino people specifically. And why are they saying that? Well, it's actually pretty rich. You see, the night that Omar Mateen attacked the club was their regular Latin-themed music night, even though the club has a wide variety of nights at it. Still, he targeted the Latin night. Why? Well, it could possibly be because the Latin night happened every week on Saturday night and is likely their busiest night, as Orlando has a very large Latino population anyway. But according to SJWs, of course, they think that he chose the night to attack because he was targeting quote-unquote people of color, even though he was, by their definition, a person of color himself. But it gets more absurd. It has been reported from a survivor of the attack that he specifically said that he wanted to avoid shooting black people because black people have suffered enough. With that knowledge, normally one would take this to mean that the guy was not a racist, considering he was of Middle Eastern descent, and that he actually avoided targeting black people, and he did, in fact, kill some white people. However, there are SJW rumors floating around that despite any evidence, what really happened was that Mateen just really hates Latino people. Seriously. They know he avoided shooting blacks, so they assume without any evidence that he really hates Latinos. Now granted, Talk to any mixed race person with indigenous blood from the Americas running through them, and they can tell you that being Latino is not necessarily a sign of any specific skin tone, as there are white, black, indigenous, and even Asian people in Latin American countries, but most SJWs are too racist to even think much about that. Regardless, the idea that this jihadi shooter was just a Latin American gay-hating, toxic masculinity lunatic would probably seem absurd and unbelievable to somebody outside of the regressive left social justice mentality, when the motive for the shooting was obviously very clear. He was a radical Islamist that wanted to kill a bunch of infidels to make sure that he'd get into heaven. And people at gay clubs are generally infidels. But you see, it obviously can't be so simple because the LGBT community is supposed to be an obedient political activist squadron for the Democratic Party, which can be utilized at any moment to attack anything even remotely right-wing, and if not, the community will be pitted against the presumably right-wing boogeyman that is the white cis heterosexual male patriarchy. I mean, he did accidentally shoot a few black guys, so, take a look at this meme I found. They got the total deaths wrong. There was 49, not 50, but apparently other than that, this person really did say exactly that publicly on social media. Take a look at it. It's pretty funny. You see, to this attack squadron, which is the Democratic Party's LGBT community, to them, they think Islam is cool. Islam is fine because the Democratic Party thinks that they fucking own the LGBT community and the Democrats have strong ties with Islamic governments, and therefore Islam can never be the bad guy. So when the Orlando massacre happened exactly a year ago to this day, far leftist regressive feminists were quick to do anything they could to distract people from what actually happened, including attacking white people, because reasons. All the while, is it any wonder that there is nothing in mainstream media about the fact that some of the victims are suing social media companies for not cutting down on ISIS recruiting tactics online? Seriously, look at this article. Some of the victims' families are suing. Do you ever hear SJWs talking about ISIS recruiting online? Even though so many of them are queer and therefore would be super likely to be targets of attacks? Ultimately, the thing to keep in mind is that for the fourth wave intersectional feminist social justice warriors, everything is always about them as individuals. The black lesbians or black gay guys or the deaf trans women in wheelchairs want to maintain the intersectional narrative so that they can maintain the hierarchy because they benefit from it as individuals. And the people who maintain it that don't benefit from it, well, a lot of them declare themselves to be non-binary pansexuals so that they can sort of benefit from it, or they just feel really, really guilty and let the black lesbians in wheelchairs order them around. Now, these people did not create the hierarchy. That was something long in the works in academia in various humanities departments for decades that largely happened to be shaped by Marxists. However, these intersectional feminists benefit from the hierarchy created by the Oppression Olympics, so even when there is an attack of a nature that potentially could affect all LGBT people, these people have to cling to the narrative that it was a specified racist attack because queer people of color always have it worse, even when attacked by other people of color who happen to also be oppressed. Oh, crap. Mind overblowing. Because, you see, without the narrative that it's always the white male patriarchy keeping everybody in the Americas down, and therefore you have to listen to the intersectionals to let them solve all of the problems. Without that narrative, these people wouldn't really have anything. Their talking stick might just be taken away, and they might have to listen to white guys who might just be more qualified to talk about politics and social issues than they are. So, rest in peace, Orlando victims. It's a shame that your deaths have become a political tool for so many people in our own country on both the right and the left political spectrums. But we must always remember why your deaths have been politicized. It's because your killer precisely wanted it that way, as his Islamist motivation was inherently political. Drop me a comment, hit the bell button so you don't get unsubscribed, and stay tuned.